and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today. It is October 7th, a Friday, and we wanted to go over the news that we covered yesterday, an event that we were at, which is for the Division of Human Rights in New York State. It's a very important event, not so much for what happened during it, but because of what will be happening because of it. And no other news media covered this, but I think this is important for the people of New York State, as well as the entire nation, to know what's going on, the expansion of equity and diversity, and its impact on your daily life. Now, before we get started with that, we do want to mention that if this is the first time that you're seeing our channel, we want to welcome you and we thank you for being part of our audience. We want you to know that every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out on all the social media that the internet overlords will allow to hear your voice, to hear what you have to say about the issues that affect us all. And it's open to everyone in the world because the First Amendment isn't just an American principle. Freedom of speech is for everyone. Even if your government doesn't agree, even if the internet overlords don't agree, we want to hear you, and we hope you will join us this Sunday at 2:30 p.m. and every Sunday. Yesterday, we took the opportunity to attend an event being put on by the New York Human Rights Division, and it was being hosted by Binghamton University. This event had no news media coverage. No one else in the news media attended this event. And that's kind of suspect. We had a question about that. But our question started long before that. In fact, when we received an email from an individual notifying us of this event. Now, one of the most important things in the email that we received was the notification that politicians and political candidates were discouraged. In fact, they were denied the ability to be part of the event. I know for a fact that when I went to the Binghamton University rooms hosting this, that Councilwoman Angela Riley of Binghamton, New York City Council was denied entry into the event. I saw her as she was leaving and she had been turned away. She was the only politician that I'm aware of that tried to attend the event because it was clearly stated that politicians were not to be involved. I find that to be really questionable because we have an event that's supposed to be open to the public, but it is excluding politicians who serve the public, or at least ideally, that's what they're supposed to do, serve the public. And this is an issue which is the full force of New York State behind it. It is political. It is legislation, or has the power of legislation, and yet politicians are not involved. Politicians who are supposed to know their constituents and their concerns, they're not allowed in. That seems questionable. Now, in the past, when we have seen events like this, generally what we have found is this is an event controlled by the far left, and it's usually a means of propaganda for them, that they get together, they have a theory that they want to promote, and they use these events to give them fuel and attention to do so. Now, this event, which came from appointed Governor Kathy Hochul, is to establish a statewide hate and bias prevention unit at a community-focused, coordinated rapid response level. The event was on October 6th. It started at 4 p.m. and would last until 7 p.m. I arrived at the event at 4:30, and I stayed until the very end. Again, we were the only member of news media to attend the event. We were the only ones to participate in the event. And we did so not as a news media per se, but as a member of the community who has a vested interest in what New York State is about to do and how it will affect the lives of residents in New York State and, of course, in the southern tier of New York. Let's get into what does this event actually pertain to? What does it actually do? And that's a really tough question. You see, The New York State Hate and Bias Prevention Regional Council is to me made up of approximately 20 to 30 individuals meeting once every 3 months to discuss issues of hate and bias and perhaps to get the New York Human Rights Division to create lawsuits for them where they feel that they have been wronged or that there is an injustice that has happened and that injustice is based on bias or discrimination. Except everyone who is talking about this really wasn't talking about the southern tier of New York. They really weren't talking about issues affecting people today. And that became very apparent as we went through the event. Take a step back. When I entered the event, there were a total of 12 individuals, including myself, that were part of the event. What happened is that there was a circle, kind of like a deliberation. In the military, we would call it a gripe session. 12 individuals talking about their feelings on hate, bias, discrimination overall. Now, that's not specific to events that happened in Binghamton, New York, in the Southern Tier, in New York State, or even in the United States. There was no exclusion to that. These weren't events that happened within the last 5 years or even the last 6 months. The event started off with individuals talking about their experiences of hate and bias and discrimination in their lifetime. Now, events that happened to me, I personally have experienced hate and discrimination and racial bias at various points in my life, in particular in the 1970s when I was in first grade. Does that have any relevance to what's happening today in 2022, as I'm 54 and a grown man? No, there's no connection between those two events. There was a very different world in the 1970s than there is in 2022. And much has changed between that time. So we had individuals in the group that were talking about being in Puerto Rico in the 1970s. Actually, it was 1973. They were talking about in Puerto Rico, there is a vote on whether or not Puerto Rico will remain as a commonwealth or become independent or become a state. It happens every generation or so. And they were there in the 1970s. And that individual was talking about their experience about everyone that they knew, everyone around them was looking for statehood for Puerto Rico. And that's kind of interesting because they're framing this statement that this was absolutely important and they were being discriminated against because being a non-Puerto Rican in Puerto Rico, they were excluded and they felt bias on that. I don't doubt that they may have had the experience that they were being discriminated against, and there were some individuals who were looking for statehood, but that wasn't commonplace. That's one example. We had several examples of individuals who said events that happened in their teens, in high school, in college. These are grown adults well past those years, and they're talking about those events. And New York State is using those experiences to shape a division, a community action unit that's going to affect policy and lives today on things that aren't happening today. That's important. That's critical. There were other individuals who were talking about during the event how they disparaged and were angry with the 2016 election. And they felt very open to say that everyone must agree with them that in 2016 the vote went the wrong way. Except I happened to mention I didn't agree, that I didn't feel like that, and that many people didn't feel that way. And based on the votes in the United States in 2016, that wasn't an accurate representation of America, but it was a fair representation of the far left. Big difference between those two things. Now, I don't want this to seem like all 12 individuals at the event, 2 of which were actually working for New York State's Human Rights Division. They were actually representatives of New York State in this event. So actually only 10 residents of Binghamton, New York, of the Broome County of New York, were actually in the event. But the two members of New York State Division of Human Rights, they were participating. But here's the thing. There were people who mentioned very serious issues that were relevant to the conversation. One individual had mentioned how they had gotten death threats. And then there was myself. When I shared with the group an experience that I personally had had that I thought was incredibly relevant and important for the discussion that was going on. Now, not everyone may remember this. It was August 11th of 2020. And what I experienced at that time, and as I described to this group on discrimination, was this event where I was surrounded by 50, maybe 75, depending on the moment, 50 to 75 radical individuals who were using racial slurs that were threatening me physically. And some of these individuals went on to later post in emails and into social media threats on my life. Let me show you in a moment just a little bit of what was live streamed on August 11th at the event.
Never happened if the dick wasn't snapping. I'm a hot girl. I do hot shit. That shit come on my outfit.
That little snippet of an event that lasted well over an hour, that those individuals drove away the news media. I was trying to do an interview with the news media to talk about why I was at that event. And those individuals came up and tried to silence my voice. They scared the local news media and made them run away, so I wasn't able to have the interview to convey why I was at this event and why I wanted to speak out, to have my voice heard, the First Amendment. And that this video doesn't convey that for over an hour I was surrounded and shouted at and screamed at and threatened. And I conveyed that to the Human Rights Division of New York as they were considering what they would do. Now, they were taking notes on the group, and it's interesting that in conveying my comments, they reworded the event. They made it clear that, I was surrounded by individuals who happened to be Republicans that were angry and calling me Uncle Tom. That wasn't true. And I made them correct that. In fact, it was members of BLM and Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow that were the ones assaulting me. It was those individuals, both black and white and otherwise, that were trying to silence my First Amendment rights. It was those individuals who said that an opposing position, idea, thoughts, they could not be expressed. And so when the Human Rights Division came together and they presented the conversation of the 10 citizens, residents of Broome County, they just edited out the fact that it was the far left that was trying to silence someone from center right. They left out the fact that the bias isn't just white versus black. No, in fact, that it exists and in recent history has been going the opposite way. Except New York State doesn't want to deal with that. New York State doesn't want to recognize that. And so they just deleted that portion of the public record and discussion on this potential new organization, and this went on their way. I found that to be very critical about this. No wonder they didn't want politicians to be involved or political candidates. No wonder that this event that was open to the public only had 10 individuals, almost all of them being individuals somehow connected to New York State. We can look at this from many different directions, and there's a lot that we can understand about this event But it's important to understand, perhaps most of all, is that this event was just like the event that we had seen back in December of 2021. When we covered the institutional racism at the SUNY Broome College, where students and the public were being introduced to racial justice, as they called it, a railroad program that was meant to achieve one goal: to convert individuals into a progressive ideology, to confirm and to solidify in the minds of everyone that attended that systemic racism was real, that whites are evil and racist, blacks are victims, and only the government could possibly help. And that's an ideology that we have consistently said on this channel is abhorrent, because by definition, it means that people of color, minorities, and immigrants, you are less than human, that you are less than capable of having agency in your own life, that you're always a victim, and it is only through the good graces of government that you will ever be able to be equal and to achieve. And to get there, the government must impose equity to improve your life. And when we say equity, we do not mean equality. They do not exist at the same time. Equity means priority based on an agenda, usually political, that is put in place, that you are going to be raised above others just because someone has said they want it that way. Equity cannot exist with equality, and the progressive movement in New York State and across this nation, California, Illinois, Maryland, Baltimore, Delaware, we see this constantly, that there is a movement towards equity, not equality, and that there is a prioritization that is based on a political agenda. And we're seeing that in New York State with the Human Rights Division. They have an agenda, they have a goal, and they are trying to push that forward onto the people of New York, whether or not it actually is relevant or beneficial. Again, we were at the event for 2.5 hours. Of that time, approximately 2 hours were spent just in that small group, that small circle of 12 people, 10 of which were actually residents, 2 of which worked for New York State and the Human Rights Division directly. And in that event, at no point was it very clear what the actual goal of the event was. I mean, that's troubling. We know what New York State is saying the event was about, what they were trying to convey, that they wanted to hear the voices of the local community so that they could better create an organization to address those concerns. It sounds fantastic. How are they going to do that? They're going to meet with 20 to 30 individuals, selected individuals, hand-picked individuals, that are going to convey to them issues in the community once every 3 months. And then New York State is going to do what exactly? It's unclear. At one point, we hear from the New York State Human Rights Division that they're more than willing to sue organizations, including the school system and private businesses, on behalf of individuals who feel that they have been offended, that they have been victims of racism and discrimination. Okay, that's fine. Once every 3 months. But does that mean it's valid? Is that something that they should be doing? Is this where our tax dollars should be spent? Because if someone has a lawsuit, shouldn't they pursue that themselves? And New York State can come in and help them, but not take it over. Is that really what we want our tax dollars and our government to be focused on, especially at a time of a recession, especially at a time when there's so much division in the United States, much of it coming from the far left, whether it be on social media, the mainstream major media, or even from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Joe Biden making his Reichstag speech in Philadelphia, and Kamala Harris most recently talking about how the victims of Hurricane Ian will receive relief based on equity and diversity, not need. Let me ask another question about this event that was never made clear at any point. And even when we look at the documentation that was provided by New York State, nowhere in there does it mention who's going to pay for this. How is this going to be organized? So New York State wants to create a division of hate and bias prevention in the southern tier of New York. Is New York State paying for that? Is Broome County and other counties in the region, are they paying for it? Which set of taxpayers? Are taxpayers in Broome County solely going to shoulder this burden? Or is it limited to the city of Binghamton? Or is it every single citizen in New York State? Are they going to pay for the taxes to cover the cost of it? How many people are going to be hired to execute this event once every 3 months? How many full-time or part-time employees must be hired? What are the criteria for someone being hired for this event besides the 20 to 30 individuals that will be part of this regional council? Are they paid positions? Who determines how much they get paid? And what is their influence? Again, I must ask, what are they going to be responsible for doing? What is the end goal? Besides to complain about whether or not you believe systemic racism may or may not exist, and whether or not it exists from the left against the right, whether it's white versus black or the reverse, what exactly is going to happen? See, that was never made clear throughout the event. Now, I want to be fair and to give you a chance to hear what New York State's Human Rights Division had to say at the event itself, and what their chair, their representative, had to say to those 10 individuals from the community that were listening to them in their presentation. And I want you to hear exactly what they said.
Do we have a handout about what is the purpose of the regional council? And again, it's supposed to be tailored to your region. So the people that are on the regional council will really decide what issues you want to work on. But the idea is that there's...
And again, let me show you that document that I have in my hand right there is this document that I just spoke to. And she said, so this is going to be a regional, decisions will be made by the region, but this is what New York State is looking to do. And I'm showing you the document right now, and it says, do you want to be part of the movement to eliminate hate and bias in your community? The New York State Division of Human Rights is launching a hate and bias prevention unit that will take a community-driven approach to prevent and respond to hate and bias incidents throughout the state. That doesn't explain what they actually do. That is very vague. What is defined as hate and discrimination and bias? How are they going to respond? What is the full power of the United States government, of New York State, and the resources, the tax dollars of New York citizens going to be used to do? They don't clarify. It goes on to say, the Department of Human Rights is creating 11 regional councils to empower community members to prevent, unite, and respond to hate and bias incidents. The harmful and deadly impact of hate and bias grows more apparent every day. The need for local action could not be more urgent. Now, are we talking about things like the Waukesha event? Are we talking about the black supremacist that shot people in the New York City subway? Are we talking about the Buffalo shooter? Are we talking about the Uvalde shooter? There's many different things that are affecting the people of New York. And by the way, some of the ways we can protect the people of New York is to allow them to buy bulletproof vests and have passive self-defense, which is now illegal in New York State. Or perhaps you would be able to, as the Supreme Court said, be able to conceal carry or at the very least exercise your Second Amendment rights, which New York State, under appointed Governor Kathy Hochul, and assembly members and state senators, assembly members like Donna Lopardo, individuals like former Congressman Antonio Delgado, who abandoned the New York 19th. These individuals, they're saying you can't defend yourself. So how is this organization going to defend you when New York State is saying you can't defend yourself as an individual? The goals of the group, as stated in the document, is empower the region to stand up against hate and bias. Empower them how? What is that empowerment? What does that entail? Build local capacity to prevent and respond to hate and bias incidents. How will the local community have the ability to respond? What is the response they are talking about? Going on, support local individuals and communities as they heal from the trauma of hate. What is the trauma of hate? What is the hate we are speaking about? Is it the hate that I experienced when progressive leaders of tomorrow decided to try and silence my First Amendment rights? Is that the hate that they're speaking about? Is it the protests that we have seen from BLM and progressive leaders of tomorrow, Citizen Action, Indivisible New York, as they clog our city streets and usurp and take over parades like the Columbus Day Parade? Are those the events they're talking about? And what are they going to do to those individuals besides arrest them, as they were in some of these cases, and then, based on the policy as promoted by appointed Governor Kathy Hochul and the progressive leadership, release them immediately so that they can again reoffend and commit even more crimes? Is that what they're talking about? See, it's very vague. It's not clear at all what they're going to do or how they are going to achieve these goals, as you can see in the document. They say examples of the types of actions that might be taken on a local level by the regional council: participating in dispute resolution, restorative justice, anti-racism trainings. So they're going to teach people that, according to critical race theory, which this is based upon, that white people are racist inherently, that racism is inherent and subconscious, and that you are a victim and only the government can protect you from that. This is what they want to teach you. And that in having this conversation, that's going to resolve it. Really, crackheads don't care. This is not going to stop a crackhead from stabbing someone or shooting someone. It's not going to address the youth that we have seen in the southern tier that are shooting each other. An 18-year-old just 2 months ago shot a 17-year-old, it was 3 months ago. An 18-year-old shot a 17-year-old half a block away from the high school in the region. And they're talking about racial justice. Both those individuals happen to be black, by the way. This doesn't address the crime or that kind of hate. They go on to say partnering with schools to address intergroup conflict. So gang conflict. So they're going to partner with the schools to talk to kids about gangs and the problems, the beef that one gang has with another. Well, usually the gangs have problems because of drug sales. So crime. I don't think that's going to be as effective as they think it might be. Offering healing circles and community dialogues. Healing circles, we're going to get together and sing Kumbaya. And that's going to make everything better. This is what they want to spend your tax dollars on. Developing lists of local resources. I can do that with Google. Why do I need to pay New York State through my taxes and employ individuals to put together a list that's on Google? And if New York State really thinks it's important, they can put that on, and they have lists of resources on their website. All I need to do is go and look in Google. I don't need them to do that for me now on a local, regional level. Hosting events and activities such as art shows, reading groups, movie nights, days and weeks of action to raise awareness about hate and bias prevention. So they want to put together a movie night. They want to rent out a movie theater to show you the movie Bros that is universally disliked. The LGBTQAI++, the whole alphabet. They rejected this movie. This movie has not been well received by anyone. And yet they're going to use that kind of movie to force individuals to watch this so that you will be more sensitive to LGBTQ. Is that the real idea behind this? Is this what we're going to do? We're going to have an art show. People can look at a picture, and then because they saw that, they're going to make a decision. Well, that's the same thing as saying that we have signs that say this is a gun-free zone. That hasn't been very effective. It's the same idea. And gangs, criminals, they don't care. The deranged don't care. It's not effective. We're not talking about effective policies here. Youth engagement. That's the one thing on the entire list that seems to make some kind of sense to me, to engage the youth, to make them aware of the consequences of their actions. We need to actually have a conversation with the youth to reject separate, safe spaces and separate but equal. We need to reject that. And we have to continue along a path that says, like Dr. Martin Luther King, having people unified and together, like Gandhi, like Mother Teresa. But I think that's not the goal. That's what New York State is looking to do. And that's not what we're seeing them talk to us about what's going to be our future. Let me go back and listen some more to what she has to say, what New York State Human Rights has to say.
You know, when I was at the YWCA, we had an expression, strong alone, fearless together. And this is about building a movement. And I love what you said about that we're building, you know, that humanity is beautiful. It's the similar approach that instead of hate, we have love. So at the Y, we used to always say strong alone, fearless together. And so that's what the idea of the regional council is too, is to bring all different people together from the community to say no to hate, so that if there is an incident, we could quickly mobilize with the rapid response team to address it. We're thinking.
Okay, so they want to teach everyone in the community to love, not hate. Well, that's Dr. Martin Luther King, that's Gandhi, that's Mother Teresa. Sounds like something that should be happening in churches. It sounds like a religious movement. It doesn't sound like something the government is there to do. The government's there to protect you, not to tell you to love someone whether or not you want to love them or not. That's your personal individual responsibility or your personal individual reaction. Maybe your parents could help you with that if you're a youth, but that's not the place of education in terms of schools. That's not the purpose of the government, to define who you should love and how you should express that love. That's not government. That's autocracy. That's a dictatorship. That's a cult. So I don't agree with the purpose that they're trying to identify. And again, they mentioned this rapid response organization, this unit. What is that unit comprised of? Are we talking about police, state police? Are we talking about some organization of the government to do what? To impose fines, to jail people, to embarrass them in the public, to bring them to court? What are they going to do? What is this rapid response they keep mentioning, but they won't define? It's very important to know that. But yet they're glossing past that and just saying, yeah, they're going to respond and we're going to teach people to love each other, which isn't the purpose of government. And the government, by the way, is horrible at teaching people anything. They're having difficulty teaching kids 2 + 2 = 4. Instead, they're trying to teach them that 2 + 2 = racism. And we want them to teach people love? I don't understand that. The state can't even define what a man or a woman is, but they want to define what love is. I have a problem with this. I think you should too. Let's go on and hear what else she has to say.
Doing training. Hopefully we'll be working to do conflict resolution, anti-racism training, restorative justice approaches.
What's restorative justice? Because we know how it's taken form so far. It's been bail reform. That's restorative justice. It's not charging people with crimes. Remember the BLM riots that took place in New York? in Rochester, in Manhattan, in Syracuse, throughout this nation, and in particular throughout New York State, where people were assaulted for eating a dinner. They were eating and not involved at all with what was going on with BLM and their protests. And BLM came to those diners and destroyed the business and threatened those individuals. Is that the restorative justice we're talking about? That there were 6,000 people arrested in New York State because of the riots with BLM. And each of those individuals had the charges dropped. Because of the revolving door politics that are out there, we allow individuals like the man who tried to kill Lee Zeldin on a stage, as we saw in live streams, walked up, tried to stab him with a bladed brass knuckles. That man was arrested and released within an hour. Is this the restorative justice they're talking about? Where criminals are released, and we've seen case after case after case, where we have seen New York State, when they finally do arrest someone for a crime, they release them, and that individual goes out and commits the same or more crimes the same day. Seem beneficial to you? Let's go on.
So we don't have a cookie cutter, like I said, or a list of we're going to do this, but we want to be responsive again to each end.
So they don't even have a plan. They don't even know what they're going to do. Perhaps that's the biggest answer. Why don't we have answers to any of these questions? Because New York State, Kathy Hochul, has no answer. There is no response. They don't know what they're going to do. They're going to make it up as they go. They don't have a plan, a guideline, anything to tell them what they should or shouldn't do, or what they're going to respond to or not respond to. They have no idea. They are winging this with your tax dollars, with the full weight and power of New York State's government behind them. Tell me that's not ripe for abuse. Massive abuse. This sounds dangerous.
So we hope that, again, each one of you would consider participating in the region. We were thinking that as it moves forward, that we would meet quarterly, but probably in the beginning, to set it up, there might be more meetings involved.
So they want 10 people who appeared to be involved in this organization of 20 to 30 people, ideally. 10 individuals, the predominance of which work at some level with or in New York State government, that have over half the group had political leanings, and those were left-leaning ideologies that they expressed very clearly, and they wanted to push this message in this discussion, as I observe. And so their bias matches the bias apparently from New York State. These are the people they want involved. Wouldn't they want something a little more representative? Something that more encapsulates the different peoples that make up Broome County and the Southern Tier region? Shouldn't they be looking for more than just ideologues to join this organization that is meant to ideally target discrimination and racism that exists, whether it's going black against white or whether or not it's going from the left against the right?
Oh, I just wanted to add one thing, and it's interesting for us because this is our 5th regional regional meeting, and a lot of the themes are similar. And one,
they've done this 5 times so far across New York State, and 5 times they've run into organizations. They've had these meetings, and they've gotten individuals to talk about past experiences that have nothing to do with the current day, where people didn't get a job and they felt like they should have gotten the job, where they've had individuals say that things that happened to them 40, 50 years ago, well, that's what's affecting them today, that they have a political ideology that doesn't match most of upstate New York, that doesn't match what most of the United States believes, that they want to push that agenda. This is what we're seeing across New York State 5 times now.
theme that we've been hearing loud and clear, and actually this is very important to us as well, so that we want to bring youth voice to the council and to the unit. So we are thinking about how we can create like youth ambassadors, if you will. So we are trying to figure out.
So they want influencers. They want TikTokers. They want people from TikTok and from YouTube shorts to get involved to help guide the message that we see that is being reinforced by teachers. And we've seen the TikToks, the libs of TikTok. We've seen how kids are being indoctrinated. We've seen that, as I showed you, over at SUNY Broome, where kids are being indoctrinated into this left-leaning progressive ideology, and they want them to be part of this group too. That doesn't sound good. Let's go on.
That would look like have voice in the unit.
We still don't know what this is going to do. We don't know what it's comprised of. We do know they're going to wing it as they go forward. Let's see what else they have to say.
Well, so I'm very grateful for the time that you devoted to this. This is just a beginning, and I know we want to be as representative as possible. So
they're not trying to be representative. They're not trying to be representative, because if they were being representative, they would have made sure that there was more white people there. They would have made sure there were more Republicans and conservatives there. They would have invited some libertarians to be there. Maybe some religious leaders would have been involved with this. We should have had political officials, elected officials, who are responsible. They are obligated to represent the views of the public. Not that those politicians could speak, but so that they could hear what their constituents are concerned about. They should be involved too. So no, it's really not about bringing people together and representing them. This is about representing an ideology that New York State has already determined they want, and they're going to push this message forward. That's what appointed Governor Kathy Hochul is doing. Before the 2022 elections, before Democrats lose power across this nation and probably in this state, they're doing it now while they have the power to do so. That's important to understand. Let's see what else they say.
That you think would be great to get involved in work, please feel free to share information about it. In terms of next steps, we will be compiling what your ideas were and sharing it with you, as well as sending you the information about the regional council, just as a reminder, so that if you want to stay involved, you can stay involved. And then I'm going back to the very beginning, but I want to give a plug for our office as well here in Binghamton, because I had said, we do enforce the law, so people can bring discrimination complaints to us. But we also have what we call division-initiated action, which is really a great strategy or tool that we have, where the state, we can actually bring a discrimination claim on behalf of a systemic issue. So I know I heard you mention something about the school system. So it is possible, if you contact HR at our division initiation action, look into that issue, decide whether or not you would bring a complaint on behalf of the state. So I just wanted.
So they have just said they would, depending on the case, that New York State will take action and sue the local school systems because someone had a problem, because someone had an issue. Whether or not it's actually legitimate is, well, that's a different question. Now, we've seen this before, and we've seen how wrong it can be. You may recall that it was just, in 2021, we found out, because remember, there was this story that went around that, 3 girls in Binghamton school system were strip searched. Do you remember that national, in fact, international news story about how the evil of the Binghamton school system allowing a principal to strip search 3 students of color? And as it turned out, there were 0 headlines, besides from our own coverage, When the case actually went to the courts, it was found to be completely 100% false, that it was a lie. It was a political event. It was made up by various political organizations on the left to try and embarrass Binghamton, to try and swing the politics of the region, and to gain the advantages of New York State for their political ideology. It was never true. It didn't happen. New York State saying that they're more than willing to go ahead and do this again, to start investigations, to bring national and international pressure on local school systems because someone has a feeling that there's something may have happened. In an environment where we are told on a daily basis in our movies, in our entertainment, in our politics, in the news media, and even from Joe Biden in his Reichstag moment, that if you don't agree, you are the bad guy, you're the extremist, you're the problem. In that environment, New York State is going to say, hey, we heard that someone accuses the school system of strip searching girls. We're going to come down with the full weight of New York State government. And then what happens when they're wrong? After they've spent your tax dollars and our tax dollars, after they've besmirched the reputations of various individuals, what's New York State going to do then? Oops. Send you a letter saying I'm sorry? Do you see where the abuse can come from with all of this? Do you see the problems and how people can use this to their advantage politically, which will definitely damage communities across New York State? This is what they are offering right now. This is what happened at an event I was at yesterday. 2.5 hours. And I want to be very clear. I don't think that any of the people from New York, the Division of Human Rights, I don't think any of them are bad people. I don't think they have bad intentions, or at least most of them don't. I think this is a political opportunism. That there are some people, appointed Governor Kathy Hochul, who are using this at this moment before an election to try and gin up votes, to try and motivate the far left to be involved in elections, to try and guarantee that they maintain in power. That we believe that some individuals are using this as an opportunity to advance their political agendas using your tax dollars and the full weight of the government. I think there's a lot of people who genuinely believe that there are issues in America and that they want to address them. I believe that there are some people who have legitimate concerns, and some of those were expressed in the meeting yesterday. But that was the minority of things that were covered. What was mostly being addressed, what was mostly being promoted, what this event is absolutely advertising, marketing, and making more possible is division based on race and based on a political ideology of the progressive left. Just like the critical race theory applications that we have seen and that we have discussed on this channel happening at SUNY Broome, at Binghamton University, throughout this nation, this isn't good. It's not good for individuals or communities or the nation. We need to change our focus. Now, we've gone through this in some detail, going through what we experienced and what we saw. We've tried to convey to you as much as we possibly could about the event and what New York State is trying to do. You may not agree. You may think this is absolutely necessary. And if you do, we want to hear why. Supposed Regional Hate and Bias Prevention Unit. What do you think they're going to do? What power do you think they should have? How much money of your taxes and our taxes should be spent on doing whatever it is they're ultimately going to do? I'd like to hear what you have to say about that. And of course, as always, we look forward to seeing you and your comments every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard when we have a discussion about this and all issues affecting not just New York, not just the United States, but everyone in the globe. I know you've heard it before. What difference does it? You make the difference when you watch, chat, tweets, your likes and shares, and your subscription. You make the difference. From across the world, you help us to keep the lights on and the stream alive. You are making the difference to fight the woke and the crazy legislation that we see before. We at No Soundbites Allowed, and I want to thank you for everything that you do in helping us reach our goal, and your likes, your tweets, your comments, and your subscriptions to the channel. We want to thank you from the bottom of our heart. And this is a special thank you to those who have donated to the channel and helped us in all of our efforts. We will strive to make this channel the best that we possibly can, because you deserve no less. Thank you.